Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Riverdale. So in this episode, it heavily dealt with the Blossoms dealing with the backlash, kind of like one of the biggest backlashes of Jason dying, because Jason was going to be the heir that kind of had the torch of the Blossom family, the whole Maple dynasty was going to be passed to him, but then the only next person in line is Cheryl. I mean, truth be told, I think that's why Polly's also so important to them too, because eventually they just have to wait for her to give birth to the children, let them get a little bit older, because it's like they don't really trust Cheryl with this, but because to them, she's kind of unstable, unruly, not really sure where she will go in this whole situation. But I think they're waiting for Polly, which we do find out that Polly is giving birth to twins. So it might be a situation for them that they're waiting for, like, oh, the next boy in the family to pop up. Obviously, Cheryl invites Archie to this whole situation, and this whole event is kind of I forgot what the exact wording was, but basically it's like when the maple season kind of comes into play. And so it's like what ends up happening is a lot of the board of directors have come. Basically, the vultures are circling because the sharks in more particular is a better metaphor. It's like the sharks are swarming because they smell blood in the water. They're here to make sure that everything's still going, the business is still going well and everything. You know, more so than anything, a lot of them doubt Cheryl because they're like, yeah, the way she acted at her brother's memorial, which you had Archie like defending her like crazy. It's like, don't be an idiot. Her brother died. Like, she did the right thing by trying to, like, would you expect her to be cold-hearted like everyone else? It's like, that was her brother, like, her twin brother at that. Because, I mean, and I've had to emphasize that because they haven't even, twins have an even stronger connection. I mean, at least I assume, just from different stuff makes me think that, from twins I've met in real life to, just twins in media and stuff like that. But nevertheless, that's the whole situation in itself, too, is that Archie kind of got dragged along. Obviously, Cheryl took an interest and wanted him to come, but he's like, nah, I got a girlfriend, Valerie, and he's like, I don't think she'd be cool with me doing that. It's like, I personally don't feel cool with that. Then his mom, Cheryl's mom started like throwing stuff in his way. It's like, oh, the fact is that Cheryl has an uncle who's on this music board at this very prestigious music like school and stuff like that, kind of dangling that in front of Archie's face. It's like, okay, go with Cheryl, which, he does. Then you have Cliff being like, oh, I wasn't all that sure about you, but the fact of the matter is, come to this dance. Once again, Archie's like, I'm not sure. Once again, having everyone telling him, Archie, back away from this. You don't want to trust the Blossoms, because the fact of the matter is, Jug and Veronica, more so than anyone in life, do not trust him because they are going to want something from him. He's like, no, the Blossoms are fine. They're going to help me out and everything, but and he should have listened, because obviously the Blossoms are some like deceiving mofos. Like, the situation is, it's crazy, because it's like, especially Cheryl, you want to give Cheryl the benefit of the doubt. You see how crazy her family is. She's mourning her brother's death, but it's like she switches up so much. I mean, granted, she's not in the most stable position because her family's not the most, it doesn't like give off a very compassionate, empathetic, sympathetic, vibe that they're there for each other. It just seems like they've kind of like, it seems like they go to their different corners of the houses and they stay there. It's like, it's not like a united family, because her family looks down upon her. Not just her, even the board of directors, like I kind of brought up earlier. But trying to buy Archie off with a guitar, Cheryl buys him that, and she even went to Valerie kind of like boasting, almost like, oh, I'm gonna steal Archie from you and everything, which Archie's kind of, he's trying to tell Valerie, like, I'm not, oh, Val, it's not even like that, I'm just trying to help her out. Like, he tried to do it as a friend, which Cheryl didn't see it like that, because Cheryl's like, oh, the fact of the matter is, I wanted to think like you were like it better than anyone else, but at the end of the day, you're not. He's like, I'm trying to be there for you as a friend. She's trying to make moves on him, even kissing him, but it's like, I don't feel that way about you. I'm not here for that particular. So, oh no, you're here for other reasons, which I want to give Archie the benefit of the doubt that it isn't just that. It does seem like that is his main motivation for being there. So it kind of detracts from it a little bit, like the fact is that he's trying to help her and everything. It detracts from it a little bit, but it also does seem like Cheryl pushes people away. Like, the fact is, her and Betty, at least on some occasions, have been civil, but at one point it's like, oh, the fact is your sister's staying with me, or the fact is I'll pass along your message, maybe she might not want to hear it from you, and like bumps past her like it's nothing, like, and then treating Archie like this too, which is like, for her, she felt like she had an ally, someone that would have her back, but now she looks at Archie as like another enemy. She feel probably because she already feels like everyone at school already talks about her behind her back. No one really looks at her as a friend. Like, because truth be told, is other than her friends, who I've brought up in the past, I don't even think they're her real friends, but maybe they are. I don't know. But it doesn't seem like a lot. Cheryl is all that in a sense. Yes, she's popular, but it's a situation where I don't think a lot of people look at her as a friend. Like, she doesn't really have any real friends. I think the closest thing she has is like Betty and Veronica, and Veronica's kind of more in that line of being a friend. Betty's more of a frenemy, which Veronica kind of was from the beginning. But they kind of mended fences, especially everything going forward. But it just seems like Cheryl's kind of slipping into becoming more of a Blossom, and I'm saddened by that because it seems obviously you had her brother Jason fighting so hard to not be a Blossom because it kept him away from the person he loved and everything. So it's just a very complicated situation. And it seems like Cheryl is taking her anger out. She has basically, there's a picture that she starts marking out both Polly and Archie's face. I'm thinking Polly because basically I'm thinking with Polly, she looks at Polly as almost being like a replacement for her. It's like, oh, I'm not good enough for my family. My family downright hates me. It's like, oh, they're accepting Polly. They're bringing her in. They're cherishing her, which she at one point did too because like she's carrying Jason's baby. So like a part of her brother exists inside of Polly. It's kind of how I look at that. But now she's looking at Polly as more of the enemy because it's like, oh, you're not even someone I can rely on either. So it's so interesting to see Cheryl's character constantly flip flop. It's definitely going to be interesting going forward, seeing how she seems like she has such a problem with Archie and whatnot. Like, will she 100% sink back into her old ways of not, just, like I said, once again pushing people at a distance? Because we ended up learning more about why Cliff has taken an interest in Archie. Because it's like, oh, you're such a young man, you're concerned, oh, you have a bright future, you want to do music. The fact is that you're an honorable boy that's trying to help out his father and everything. And it seems that Cliff, almost in a sense, wanted to set Archie and Cheryl up, because it's like if Cheryl had someone beside her that was very quote unquote stable, then at the very least it put up the image of like, oh, Archie be there to kind of bounce her out, kind of keep her grounded so that she won't be unpredictable like she is, I guess. Because I think in her parents' eyes, they look at her as very unstable, that she doesn't know how to keep her emotions in check. Which is like, I don't think any of you know how to keep your emotions in check. I know it's kind of ironic coming from me, but still, it's like, you hide behind so many masks. You're never really showing your real face to anyone at any time. But it seemed like it was a situation where they wanted Archie there, kind of almost setting them up to be like, it almost seemed like they wanted to set Archie up as to be the one that, like, oh, get with Cheryl so you can be together, be a happy couple, and then eventually we can bring you in as a son to kind of take care of things. Obviously, they just wanted to use Archie, and Archie kind of saw through that. We ended up learning, though, from Archie, because he ended up overhearing it from Cliff and his wife, talking about the fact is that they're trying to close in on obviously getting the drive-through land, but it's like, oh, but they know that Veronica's dad is still, fighting for it and everything. And more so that Fred, is still an obstacle to deal with him and his construction business. It's like, oh, maybe instead of sending Hiram to jail, maybe you should have sent Fred to jail or something like that. Which then puts that all in perspective now. It's like, wait, so Cliff is the reason why Hiram got caught in the first place. Which to me immediately brought up some questions. What if Veronica's dad isn't the bad guy that everyone, even she and her mom, thinks he is? What if the fact is that Cliff was actually the big one behind all this, that all the money laundering and embezzling, well, more so the embezzling, I feel like money laundering kind of goes along with it, because you have to try and legitimize all the money you're embezzling. But what if he's actually the one behind all of it and he made Hiram take the fall for it? So what if Hiram's not the bad guy everyone thinks he is, that Cliff is? I mean, at the same time, that might not be the case. Maybe the reason why Cliff turned on him is because at one point in time they were close partners, but then Hiram got greedy, or at the very least he just started trying to get a bigger cut of the pie, and Cliff was like, no, I'm not going to take that. Oh, the fact is you're embezzling from your company? Okay then, I'm going to set you up. Which kind of throws out the theory that, Jughead and Betty start thinking, what if this gives Hiram motive to kill Jason? It's because of Cliff, like, the Lodge family has broken apart. He's locked up in jail. He got separated from his wife and his daughter. It's like, you destroyed my family. Maybe I'll do the same thing to yours by killing your son. Possibility. But I still think that'd be kind of interesting if that is the case, that Hiram isn't the guilty party that we think he is. I don't know. We really have to wait. Because another thing is that Hermione kind of started thinking that it was Cliff that leaked the information about her and Fred being together, which would make sense. But at the same time, if he has such a problem with Harem, why would he leak that? But I mean, they never really kind of threw out the possibility of anyone else. And I was thinking before maybe it was Veronica. But though at one point, there was a moment she kind of looked away. I was like, that kind of looked guilty. But then she's like, wait, he knows? So I was like, oh, so maybe she doesn't know that he knows. So maybe she wasn't the one that told him. Maybe she was. I feel like if she knew, like, that would have come up in conversation. Just like, oh, I feel so guilty knowing that her dad possibly sent those thugs after Archie's dad's business, and Moose ended up getting beat up by them. So I don't know, so many different possibilities on where that might go. Sad thing is for Archie, him and Valerie ended up breaking up because Valerie's like, dude, ever since we got together, you haven't listened to me. Like, you know, he's been kind of caught up in, it's a situation where Archie's been so caught up in everything else, trying to reach his dream, trying to help out with his dad and everything. He hasn't really listened to her. And it's like, you did before, but now you just been you caught up in everything. She's like, I'm not going to be you. Like, he's like, please let me make it up to you. She's like, I'm not like you, Archie. I can't be bought off. So that kind of sucked for him. So in that one moment, like, what started off with, because obviously he made the right move by saying like no from the beginning, but obviously everyone else was kind of like, no, go ahead and do it. I mean, a good thing from it was the fact is that he learned about Polly's real motives, and that caught me by surprise. Like, I was like, why is Polly being so distant to everyone? It's like, understand why your mom to a certain degree, but granted, your mom kicked your dad Hal out, so it's kind of like, it makes sense why you would be more like, but like the fact that she cut off contact with Betty, and then, you know, he ended up learning the reason why she did that is she came to live with the Blossoms because she's investigating them, because she knows they had to have something to do with their deaths, to do with Jason's death, and she's trying to keep Betty away because she doesn't want her sister to get mixed up in all that. She still loves and cares for her sister because she knows that Betty has fought so hard for her and is by her side always, and that's why she's doing this, because like that's the person she cares about the most. She doesn't want her to get mixed up in all of this. She wants to find out the truth about what happens to Jason. Because in this episode, speaking of the whole like Cooper family, you have Alice kind of being like, oh, I'm going to take down the Blossom family, you know. I mean, in her mind, she's trying to pretend like she's okay. Like, she's like, no, forget about Polly. Stop bringing up Polly in conversation. She betrayed us, not the other way around. So she didn't want to hear anything about Polly trying to get her back home. When in actuality, all she wanted was Polly back home. Because that's her little girl. And it's like, after everything that's happened, she wants her little girl back home. Especially after all the mistakes that she made, she wants to make up for them. So she's trying to take down the Blossoms because in some weird way she's thinking that if she takes down the Blossoms that maybe she can get her little girl back. To the point she goes to Hal about all this information. It's like, oh, we found out all this stuff about the reason why the board of directors are here. You know, there's kind of a problem on the Blossom front, which Hal doesn't let her do anything. He even locks her out of the system so that she can't be a part, you know, release any, like, kind of do the news story or whatever. Which I find so interesting because it's like, why would he out of anyone want her to do that? Because this story would damage the Blossoms. You hate the Blossoms. That's literally the point of all of this. So why won't you let her run this story that would damage them heavily? I mean, it's even interesting too because you also have Betty on that front too. Because, you know, before Betty was kind of the peacekeeper, and now it's like she's all for taking down the Blossoms, mainly because she thinks like, you know, my sister's caught up in the middle of this. I need to get my sister back. She's like, I don't trust the Blossoms. You know, especially now knowing the history behind them, but I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think it's more so just because her sister's caught up in the middle of this. She just wants her back home and everything. Because she doesn't know what the Blossoms are capable of, as we've seen with the way they kind of conduct themselves, the shady business deals and stuff that they do. So it's like, why won't you do it? Not unless he has his own way of taking down the Blossoms. Like, obviously, he's kept his distance. Like, more so than anything, it seemed like he was mad at Alice because he was so mad at her. He wanted to just shut down whatever it is. Even though that was something that would kind of align with his own ideals, I guess he wanted to shut her down just to spite her for the fact is that she kicked him out and everything. At the same time, it's like, because this is what you wanted. You didn't want her to be in the house. Now she's off with the enemy. Like, you hate the Blossoms so much, you kind of helped drive your daughter towards them. But once again, I'm kind of thinking like maybe he has his own plans in motion to kind of take care of the Blossoms himself. Maybe that's what this is all about. Maybe he's got his own dirt. And maybe in some twisted way, maybe he's actually trying to keep his family at a safe distance so that when he takes the Blossoms down, it only falls on him and not his family. You know, or maybe he doesn't really care about that right now. All he cares about is his revenge, just like the Coopers and the Blossoms, like that long blood feud and everything. So... But to the point, what caught me also by surprise was the fact is that Alice lost her cool and she threw a brick through the glass at their business, which is like, wow. Because Alice, obviously, she kind of gets in arguments and stuff like that. But the thing is, Alice has always been, she kind of loses herself sometimes, but she's always been kind of a little calm, cool, and collected. And that kind of disappeared because legitimately, she just wants her baby girl back. You know, she's like, because she kind of blames Hal because it's like, you're the reason why our little girl is left. Stop being a jerk and help me get her back. The fact is, you're doing this is stupid. We don't we love her? We both love her. But the fact is, you're so caught up in your whole blood feud thing that you won't let our little girl be home. So, but you know, that eased her mind later on, learning from Betty the whole situation. Like, no, the fact is that she's got her own reasons for doing all of this. So that Polly's doing this because she's their inside gal. And they're even suggesting that Alice start working with them at their school paper, because even though it's might be a small publication and everything, I guess she's still talking about the fact that it's because it's at a high school, they're a lot more well funded than, you know, the business that her and her husband work on their own. So, you know, it's like they need another outlet to kind of get the word out about the Blossoms. It's the only way they're going to take the Blossoms down, because it's like, obviously they're probably one of the biggest threats in Riverdale, just because it's like what they do, the way they conduct business and everything. Speaking of business, is an element I was bringing up earlier, but I kind of let slip, is Hermione ended up telling Fred the truth because Veronica told her that she should before someone else does. And the moment she said, I was like, oh, someone else is going to, oh, no one did. But Fred didn't take it kindly. At first I was like, why would Fred have such a problem with it? Oh, right. Harem is a criminal, and the last thing he wants is his business associated with one. And it also means that basically, because to him it also looks like, oh, us being together was just a means to an end to you. You just want to get close to me. Obviously, if there is something there, you only got close to me, which I truly believe that Hermione actually really cares for Fred. But the fact is, like, everything you've done has all been for the sake of this whole situation. So now I learned the truth and everything. Which later on at the end of the episode, he does kind of call it off with her. Whatever this was, we're done. For now on, we're just business part. Because it's like, from now on, I'm going to get my cut of the pie in this whole situation. It's like 20%. Because if I'm taking a risk being caught up in all this, like, criminal activity, at the very least, I better be getting something out of it. You know, this is because her business, her whole situation is what led to everything playing out. Obviously, he learns about possibly Harem being the one that sent those guys there that ended up beating up Moose and kind of trying to ruin his business. The reason why he's caught up in this crossfire, she's the reason why he's caught between, obviously at the time he didn't know it, but the mysterious buyer being her and her husband, versus, you know, Cliff, because Cliff was like, I'm coming after your business because it would hurt the person that's behind all of this. So, and once again, I'm not still 100% sure that it was Cliff. Maybe it was. Maybe he anonymously let that slip, but it's like, why would you even bother doing that? I don't know. Maybe for him to attack Fred and, you know, it's like turn against the person that's there in a position to unknowingly help you, you know. But I feel like Harem wouldn't be so ignorant as to do that. At the very least, I feel like he would wait until it was all said and done. Granted, he could probably find someone else to do it. Hermione chose Fred because she wants to help him out because the whole business is kind of falling apart situation. But and also, like, at the end of the day, like, Fred's got to look out for not just himself but also for Archie's future. That's a big reason behind everything that he's doing now too. So, and since we're talking about the whole business side of things, also, we have to talk about Veronica's side of things. Obviously, in this episode, she tries to help with Ethel. Obviously, we know Ethel from the whole, like, what was his name? Chad situation, where they had that whole book of basically, like, kind of like we hit it and quit it type of situation. Like, oh, yeah, marking down all the quote-unquote notches in their belt, essentially. Typical douchebag fashion, obviously. At the same time, I kind of feel like even douchebags have their limits, so that might be even beyond douchebaggery. But nevertheless, that's still a storyline that, like, Jughead in a voiceover in that particular episode kind of referenced the fact that there was a lot more to come, especially when it came to that situation. So that's still something we're going to be looking out for in the future, kind of like a little friendly reminder, because obviously, but nevertheless, Ethel basically dealing with family situation. Her mom and dad are arguing. Veronica wants to help her out because she ends up talking to Kevin, ends up telling Kevin about the story about how there was a girl, her and a friend of hers kind of bullied this other girl. Why? because she was just there. They don't need a good enough. They don't need a good reason to bully someone. You never do. So it was just because she was there, and she was like, I was just a terrible person back then. So now she wants to make it up to Ethel. It's like Ethel's been through a lot. She's going through a lot right now too. And at the very least, I want to do that because in some sense, she wants to make up for her crimes. Like, she made it clear to Betty from the beginning, like when I came to the school, she wanted to reinvent herself, be a better person than who she was. She was kind of top queen bee at her old school, and she doesn't want to be that person anymore. She wants to be a different person. And as we've seen, this Veronica that we see in front of us is not that person. Granted, we've never really gotten a good look at that person, but the fact is that we're being talked to, like, I get the feeling that her past is going to come back to haunt her, whether it's one of the people she bullied back in the day, or like something's going to force her to kind of confront who she was back then, and maybe we'll even get a peek at who she was back then. Maybe not. I'd be kind of interested. I'm very interested to see, will we kind of ever get like a flashback to Riverdale, like before everything before Jason died. Like obviously, like Riverdale, the main focus of this show is to show you Riverdale after Jason's death. First Jason missing and then finding out he died, like it turned Riverdale upside down. So they might not feel the reason, even if it's to tell a story in the past, like there might, at least in this season, there won't be a reason to do that, because it's like, no, we've established this Riverdale, and it's the Riverdale we want you to know for now. Then later on you can find out like, oh, this is what Riverdale was like before, like everything went down. So, and Veronica just wants to help her out and everything, because she ended up finding out from her mom that Ethel's family is one of the families that her dad Hiram ended up stealing money from, and it's like the reason why they're in the crisis they are in right now with their whole money situation. They might even have to sell their house and everything, is because of her family. And it's like, because at one point she even asked her mom's like, are we gonna have to lie when it goes to when it goes to dad's trial? And her mom's like, we might have to like shade some of the truth, basically not tell everything, which is like hits Veronica, because it's like, she loves her dad and everything, but why should I cover up for all the bad stuff he's done, especially when he's done some really, really bad things, especially in this case that he might have been the person that attacked, Fred's business and everything, ended up hurting Moose and everything. So it's like, dad's not a very good person. And even more so later on, it hits her even harder when Ethel's dad, like, takes pills and almost tries to kill himself because of just everything that's going down, because Veronica feels responsible for it. Because even though it wasn't her, she still feels responsible for the actions that her dad committed against Ethel's family, which Ethel's mom holds it heavily against her. It's like, oh, how dare you even show your face around here? And Ethel's like, even when it was all said and done, Ethel's like, why should you have to be punished for your dad's crimes? Those are your dad. That doesn't change, that doesn't make you responsible for what he did, which is like very sweet. I was hoping she'd see it that way, because it's like, because Veronica is trying to make up for it, not just from her past, but also making up for what her dad's done. She has to live with that, because, like, the fact of the matter, she even talks to her mom about it. It's like, how many people have to suffer because of dad? Dad shouldn't be allowed to get away with all the stuff that he's done. This is one particular family he's hurt. There's been countless others. Who knows who else he's hurt doing this? Because another question, too, is like, Hermione's got to also think about the fact is that, and it's something, too, that, it's like, the fact is, Veronica even brought it up too. It's like, who's to say dad won't end up hurting Fred's business too when it's all said and done? Like, obviously he has such a problem with Fred, especially now that he knows that you and him are a thing. Like, he might hurt his business, which, makes her sad, because she cares about, Fred's business, because, Archie is one of her friends, and like, she doesn't want to see, what's happening to Ethel to happen to like Archie either, or to anyone in general. So it's definitely going to be interesting going forward, seeing how like Veronica handles this whole situation, like how, because obviously she doesn't look at her dad the same way anymore, because she ends up talking to Ethel, and it's actually a very sad thing, is that her dad always gave her a lot of lavish gifts. It was his way of making up for the fact is that he did something wrong. It was like a non-apology apology, that rather than admit, I don't know, like maybe he actually did say sorry, or maybe all the gifts were just like, oh, this is a symbol of me saying sorry without saying sorry. Like, oh yeah, obviously I've probably upset you, have done something wrong, but at the very least, oh, look at this, it's beautiful and shiny. Even the pearl necklace that she wore a lot was one said gift, but when she found out about Ethel's dad, she ripped it off, because it's like, no, I'm done with you, dad. Like, the fact is, like, and it's kind of interesting, because she falls for her. It's like, oh, you and dad get back together, thought, wanted to be a happy family, but now it's like she sees her dad for who he is, possibly, quote unquote, who he is. Like I said, that's still not 100% confirmed, but at the very least, she sees who he is, and it's like she doesn't like what she sees. So it's going to make her rethink a lot of stuff, like who she's been, like obviously the question was where all this money has come from, like everything that she's ever owned, like how much of it was bought with dirty money that her dad's acquired from hurting people. So some very interesting developments all around in this twisted, crazy situation that is Riverdale. I'm still also waiting to find out what exactly is Jug's dad up to. That's a notice. Obviously, that was kind of set up last episode, but he's like, oh, I got my own role to play. And it's like, what is that role in particular? Are you working for Cliff? Are you working for someone else? Or are you the big time baddie that's kind of working behind the scenes without everyone realizing it? I don't know. Like, obviously, I don't think he killed Jason. Obviously, Jug and Betty still don't know about the jacket, which, I mean, obviously, the biker, the serpent that's Kevin's boyfriend, obviously he's hidden that away. So maybe it'd be a situation that when Kevin's hanging out with him one time, you know, they're making out on something, ends up finding the jacket or something. I don't know. It's a complex situation that gets complicated with more and more things happen. So I'm very interested to see where the next episode plans to take us. But really, that's all I want to talk about in this episode. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.